Hello, and welcome to the Heathen's Journey podcast. I'm your host, Siri Vincent Plough, and I'm so glad you're here. This is the show where I explore heathenry through a queer lens. We will be talking about traditional witchcraft, runes, folklore, and so much more. Join us, won't you, as we journey to the ends of the 9 realms and back. Welcome to the Heathen's Journey podcast, Nicole.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so happy you're here. So why don't just to get us all started and situated, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself as well as the book, which is
Yeah, of
beautiful, by the
course.
way.
So thank you so much. So my name is Nicolette Miele. Most people call me Nicole. I am the author of Runes for the Green Witch. I am also the author or the owner of the house that you hear all the banging from because I have roofers right now. Thanks, landlord, for waiting till the last minute to tell me that was happening. So apologies on my end for the noise. I had it all taken care of with my son to hang out with my dog, so my dog barking wouldn't be a problem. And now I have this.
I like to approach this podcast with the understanding that we are all human beings and have human things happening, so it's all good. I just so appreciate you taking the time. Your book is Runes for the Green Witch, an herbal grimoire, and I read it in an absolute fever dream before we sat down to record this podcast, and I really enjoyed it.
Oh, I'm glad.
Yeah. So, a few things I always like to ask people when we're writing about runes, how did you begin working with runes specifically?
So many years ago, I had a friend who was really into runes, and I knew what they were, but it wasn't a part of my practice at all. And one day he had asked me if I wanted to pull a rune from his bag, and he would, tell me what it meant, and it would be my little reading for the day. And I pulled Berkana, and then after he explained what Berkana represented, I was just kind of blown away because I've always resonated with maternal energies, even before I had a son. I've always felt very maternal. So, yeah, I was really excited when that was the rune that I pulled, and I kind of felt like it was an invitation from the runes to, ask me to get to know them a bit more. And that's how it all began.
Yeah. So the name of this podcast is the Heathen's Journey podcast, which is kind of like really focusing on Nordic practices, but I also have a whole aspect of my practice that is not Nordic. And I found reading your book to be really refreshing because, you know, I feel like you have a very fresh and modern perspective on runes. Do you consider yourself to be a heathen or general witch, pagan? Like, how does that feel for you? Because I truly believe that you do not have to be a heathen to work with runes.
Right. I
So,
I
yeah.
totally agree. Um, my practice has always just been so very eclectic. And it's funny, I was just thinking about this when the book was first released. Someone who lives in Sweden read it, and they got back to me. They wrote me a message on Instagram, and they said, "I really liked your book, but did you know that all of these plants aren't in Scandinavia?" And I said, "Well, yeah." I guess and it struck me that a lot of people just think of the runes as specific to Scandinavia, which totally makes sense. But the runes for me are so cosmic, just like all enveloping, that it never even occurred to me that people would think that this would only be a book about plants that you can find in Scandinavia. So that kind of, you know, surprised me a little bit. And so yeah, to answer your question, sure, I consider myself a heathen, like among like 10 million other things.
Yes,
Or I think,
absolutely.
oh, I'm either 20 things or I don't have a title because I'm a dabbler for sure. No, I don't like to say dabbler. I'm I have very eclectic ancestry and I like to explore all of it. So,
I think as somebody who's like very steeped in heathen culture, it's very refreshing to read a book about runes that isn't only from a heathen perspective. Just because I think that, like we do live in a global world. And, I do think that there's something to be said. And you do talk about some like ecology and stuff in the book a little bit. And I do think there is something to be said for learning the plants in your own place. However, like I still love the smell of burning sandalwood, for example.
yeah.
Um, and there are other plants, and especially if you think about plants as like being a part of our pharmacy and like medicinal, like there are a lot of plants that are in our actual like pharmaceutical medications too, that I'm not just going to say, no, I'm not going to accept this medication unless everything is from exactly where I am. So, to kind of bring that into this is really helpful and refreshing. Um, and that kind of leads me, I guess, into my next question, which was how did you begin working with plants? And what do you love about working with plants? I appreciated that you had like very short sections for each of the plants that you list in the book. And you also managed to include things about, medical uh if there were medical contraindications and stuff like that, because
Okay.
that's really important, especially when you're talking about some of the plants in here. So
Absolutely.
yeah, let's dive into that. What's your relationship there? Like, what is your kind of relationship to like magical but also a little bit of medicinal herbalism?
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, plants really began all of this witchy stuff for me. I mean, it's before I even knew what a witch was, playing in my Italian grandmother's garden and picking all her herbs and trying to make potions out of it. And it's just such a fond memory of mine. However, I didn't really begin to study plants and herbs until um, 2020 when the world shut down. I took my first herbalism online herbalism course. It was herbal medicine, and um, I just wasn't prepared for how much I was gonna fall in love with it. It just like it hooked me in, kind of the same way the runes did. What I love working about plants is, they're just so rewarding, so healing. Um, when I really began paying attention to herbs and their energies, it changed my whole worldview. I've always considered myself pagan. I've always considered myself someone who, you know, um, views God as nature. But it wasn't until I really started working with plants that I realized that the world was alive around me. Before that, before you start working with plants, in my case, they're just kind of a green blur in the background. They make things look pretty, but and I eat them, and that's about it. But when they came into focus, it was like, oh my God, I've been essentially worshiping Mother Earth since I was 12 years old, but I never really saw how alive she was, and I think that's just what was like, okay, I'm on the right path. Why I love them so much. So
I think that uh that phenomenon that you were kind of describing of like the green blur, right? I actually was at a conference one time and somebody referred to that as plant blindness.
Okay.
because you're not picking out the distinct plants. So everything is
Yeah.
just green. And I found that
Yeah.
to be really interesting because, once I started paying attention to plants, it's like when I go to a new place, it's the first thing that I need to notice,
Yeah.
is like how many plants are around. Like what's the variety?
Right. That's so cool that it's an actual thing. I didn't know that. So it's okay. Plant blindness.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Oh, you mentioned that I think you'd said that your first class was medicinal herbalism, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I that was also one of my first classes on herbalism was with a medicinal herbalist. Um and so I want to say that I appreciate that. And
Yeah.
I also know that you have your own apothecary. So how does your knowledge of working with plants and runes, are you purely like a magical apothecary at handfuls of dust, or are you actually taking clients for herbal work, or how does that all work for you?
I do not take clients. I just make things in bulk and whoever wants to buy them can. But most of what I have offered in my shop are ritual exclusively ritual items, but I am starting to increase my remedial selection. I have a lot of salves coming. I just added an herbal tattoo balm. Um, so I'd like to start increasing that sort of product as well. But for the most
Yeah.
part, I'd say 75% of it is ritual products. So
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. I think that, it would take me a really long time before I felt comfortable doing any kind of medical herbalist practice unless I'd like really gone down a super deep rabbit hole
yeah.
rapidly.
Right. And I use Etsy as well. And you have to be really careful of your wording on Etsy. I've had tinctures removed because of, medical claims that I've had. So it's so much, what do you call that? Like red tape that you have to follow. So sometimes in my mind, it was like, oh, I don't know. Is it really worth it to, go head to head with Etsy and on all this stuff? But I'm figuring it out slowly but surely.
Yeah, definitely worth it to just be like, all right, this is all for ritual purposes, or this is a curio, or,
Yeah.
what you
Yeah.
need to do for legal purposes
Makes it a lot
because
easier. Yeah.
super real. Super
Yeah.
real. Um, so do you have any runes and or plants that are currently following you around or being your current friends?
Yes. Right now, well, not so much a specific rune sticking out to me right now, but I am having a little relationship with Ghost Pipe right now. And
Oh,
she's popping up everywhere, when I go on my hikes or when I'm online. And I follow a lot of herbalists and witches on Instagram, and I've been seeing Ghost Type pop up. And um, last week I lost my dog, and that was just horrifying.
I'm
And
so sorry to hear that. That's
oh, thank
awful.
you. Yeah, and Ghost Pipe, was probably the first plant that I turned to my Ghost Pipe tincture, because it's a plant that really helps with emotional pain and also makes me really tired, so I was able to fall asleep easily.
Yeah.
So I've been hanging out with Ghost Type a lot lately, and
Yeah.
yeah, I love
Yeah, and
her.
that one, yes, beautiful. I actually read your section on Ghost Pipe, and I was like, huh, I wonder. I have some ideas about, that might be a good rune, or not rune, a good plant for me to work with at the moment as well. And I really liked how you wrote about Ghost Pipe and strength in the Uruz chapter or the Uruz section. Um,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
You know, the difficult thing about correspondences is, a lot of those plans could have been in so many different rune chapters. It depends on what aspect you want to focus on. And I guess with, ghost pipe specifically, when I think of ghost pipe, I just think of just all around healing, which I guess you could kind of say that about any plant. But no, well, not necessarily, because if I see bayberry, I think of money. So no, I shouldn't say, every plant just makes me think of healing. But yeah, ghost pipe could have gone with a few different runes for sure. But I just really wanted to focus on the healing aspects of it. And Uruz
Yeah.
is my favorite healing rune, so felt they went well together.
Yeah. I liked it, and I think too that you have such limited space in a book like this,
Yeah.
right? Where, you don't want to just like you could write an entire book just on like ghost pipe, you
Yeah.
know? Um and so what do you pull? Where do you put things? What do you highlight? And like then choosing, okay, I want to, include ghost pipe in this chapter about urus, but what does that mean that I'm highlighting about urus, right?
Right. Right. No,
There's
absolutely. You hit the nail on the head because runes by themselves are so complex. Plants by themselves are so complex. Like you said, we could write an entire book, like, flip to a page, close your eyes, and, pick a plant, and we could write a whole book about that. So, yeah, trying to decide which aspects I wanted to highlight was probably the most difficult thing for me because I wanted to do both the runes and the plants justice, and um, so there was a lot of editing with that. A lot
yes.
a lot of back and forth and rewriting and rethinking, and yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I What was your process? Was it like mainly intuitive in terms of how you sort of developed these correspondences? There were definitely some, rune plant combinations that I was like, I feel like I recognize this from somewhere, but I'm not totally sure. Um and I also think it's interesting because runes are specifically an area where I feel like tarot correspondences, for example, get like added to so many things. Because I
Mm,
read both. So like I pay
yeah, me
attention
too.
to both. Um and so there's like a lot of like historic correspondences to pull from with in terms of like plants and tarot and pairing those. I feel like it's a little bit less so with runes. Not that it's not there. It's just you kind of have to dig a little bit deeper. So um what was your like priority? Did you think mainly like what is your relationship with the plant and the rune, and therefore kind of like what makes sense to go best together? Or was it purely intuitive, like I know that this really has to be included in this chapter?
I mean, honestly, it was a little bit of all of the above. Um, some pairings are super obvious, like Rose and Awaz. That was just, like kind of a no-brainer for me. We have a very Venusian flower with a rune that is associated with love and partnership. So that made a lot of sense to me. Um, but then there were other ones that I really had to I researched a lot and meditated about it, and had to kind of dig in, do some personal gnosis work to see if that's really the pair that I wanted to put together. I remember the Othala chapter being probably the most difficult one for me in regards to finding its plant pairings, because it was like, what aspect of Othala do I want to, I mean, do I want to look at this from a family point of view, from an ancestral, from, a sacred space, Um, yeah, so yeah, some of them were just like, oh, that makes perfect sense, while others, you know, took a couple weeks, maybe a couple months for me to be like, okay, that's the one, you know.
Yeah, definitely. Um, so in the book, you mentioned that there was a bit of a learning curve for you to learn how to listen to plants. And as somebody who teaches spirit work or um rune work and all of these things, I definitely like sometimes will come across students who are like, how do you, but how how do I do this? And
Mhm.
then there are other students that find it very natural, and I almost have to like rein them in a little bit. And it's like, okay, let's talk about discernment, because this is so natural. So, like, how do you
Yeah.
tell what is what? So for other people who are maybe struggling with the idea of learning how to listen to plants, what would you recommend for those who are trying to develop that skill?
So from my perspective, I think what my issue was is I was trying to my natal chart is very earth element based. I find
Mm.
myself very analytical, and I was trying to like analyze my way into something that is intuitive, and that doesn't work. So it was like unlearning more than, learning how to do something. It was um surrendering and not trying so hard,
Mm.
because when I was trying, it's like it's with any practice. If you're, trying too hard to meditate, or trying to, do trance work or astral travel or whatever, it's just not going to happen. Like there's a point where you have to just let go. And I bless you, I don't know how you teach that. You said you um, talk about that in some of your classes. I wouldn't even know where to begin, because it was, for me, it was trying to figure out what not to do. That makes sense?
Yes, it totally makes sense. There is this huge fear, I think, in you know, any community, but I would say, I definitely see it in a lot of people, myself included, in the occult community, of doing something wrong. Um or like not like trial and error is almost not allowed in their mind because you have to do it right away, you
Hmm.
know? And I think that letting go of that, like, well, this has to happen today
Yeah.
because today is the day that I set aside to work with dandelion. And I have to talk to dandelions today. And if I
Mhm.
don't, then I'm somehow this massive failure as a witch. And that's not true. Sometimes it's just like maybe dandelion just like didn't want to pick up the phone that day. I don't know. Like
Yeah.
maybe you just weren't in the right headspace to hear or what have you, and that doesn't mean that's not like a value judgment on you as a person moving forward.
Right. Yeah. Man, witchcraft in general for me is just nothing but trial and error. I've never had like a teacher or a mentor. I've just always just had my books and me figuring it out. So, um, yeah, I couldn't imagine not expecting to fail a lot.
Yes. I feel like that's you'd mentioned that you have a lot of earth in your chart. I feel like that is a very earth chart sort of thing to say. Is like, well, I'm just going to keep going.
Yeah.
I will fail a lot and I will keep going, and it's very refreshing.
Yeah.
um yeah. Um I also just so I have my own apothecary that I'm like working on in between day job things and other
Yeah.
life things, writing, etc. And so I always love talking to people about how you sort of create your formulas and how do you, um, you know, like how do you work with that stuff, especially if you're, not necessarily making it for yourself, you're making it for somebody who you don't know, so like energetically, how do you work with that? I'm just curious. There's like a question in there somewhere and I can't quite articulate it, but like riff on that for a little bit.
Sure, sure. So, well, like I mentioned before, I don't take one-on-one clients in herbalism. I'm not sure if that's ever something that I want to do. Um, really dive into the clinical aspect of it. But as far as the, the blends and recipes that I come up with, like goes right back to trial and error. What works and what doesn't. I think I even say in the book, at the end near the formulary, that I can't even tell you how many times I thought X, Y, and Z would go well together and, tasted the tea or made the tincture and was like, nope, not even a little bit.
Yes.
So, and then, you keep a journal, you write down what works, what doesn't work, and, and go from there. But,
Yeah. I've been working a lot with scent because I've been developing my own line of like in-house ritual oils.
oh, nice.
Um and so there are definitely like correspondences and things that I want to pull in, but like for example, birch tar wood is a huge part of my personal practice, and so I want to use it in everything. But if you've ever smelled birch tar, a single drop of it is what I need for a massive batch.
Okay.
um it is a
Wait, no,
really
I've never smelled
strong,
that. Char.
it's like distilled, like if you've ever been in like a cedar sauna,
Yeah.
it's like that but like muskier.
Okay.
And I personally love like musky smells, like smoky kinds of smells like that, but
Yeah.
it is for sure a little goes a very long way.
Yeah.
That one. So I've made some very stinky oils.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny, especially working with scent and essential oil. A lot of what I have found is a lot of the things you think would go well together don't, and a lot of the things you think wouldn't go well together do. At least
Hmm.
that was, you know, um, when I started working with essential oils, I found that a lot. Like, oh, you can put like orange and jasmine together and it'll work, really? And
That sounds delicious.
and I would
Oh
have
my
never thought,
goodness.
citrus and
Yeah.
really cool, but you know, we figure it out
Yeah.
as we go.
Speaking of the formulary, I did want to ask you, out of all, you have a recipe for each rune in here, and then you have the formulary at the back of the book, and then in certain chapters you insert one of the recipes. Do you have like, this is like asking if somebody has a favorite child, but I'm going to anyway. Um what is your favorite recipe in the formulary?
I It always changes. But one that I often go back to because I love writing so much and I do it a lot, not just in hopes of being published, but for my own, um, I like writing poetry and prose and whatnot. So I often drink my creative fire tea, which I have listed. It's rose hips, ginger, vervain, cinnamon, cardamom, clove. It's kind of like
Mm,
very similar to a chai, except it has some rose
yeah.
hips and vervain. Um, I've also I have a creative fire oil that I made with basically the same recipe. So that's something that I use a lot to, just try to, clear any fog and just get my wheels turning before I start writing or, you know, um,
This I'm realizing I should have done this research before I sat down with you, but is this your first published book, or do you have others out there?
This is my first.
Oh, congratulations. Your
Thank
first book
you.
baby out in the world. Um that's fantastic. Um
You.
I know that sometimes the work in progress can be a very touchy subject. You might want to have it close to your chest, but are you, currently working on anything? And also it doesn't have to be witchy, like if you're working on a novel or something too, like that. I'd be super interested in hearing about that because I write in many genres personally as well.
Yeah, yeah. I would love to tell you what I'm doing, but I don't know if I can technically.
Oh,
Um,
intrigue.
I I don't know how I just am. I just turned it in, project number 2, about a
Okay.
week ago. So I don't know if I'm allowed to say anything else about it. So just so I don't get in any trouble, I'm gonna zip it. But I'm really excited about it, and I have a really cool um, collaborator that worked with me on it. Uh, so, oh man, I'm excited. I want to say stuff, but I don't know if I.
That's okay. I completely respect that. Those sometimes those like contracts can be tricky to navigate, and I fully respect that. Yeah.
Yeah, and you
Um
can be sure I didn't read that whole thing. So,
right. And also you can be sure that like I'm not telling you go get that contract right now so that you can tell me in front of all of our listeners what you're working on cuz um
yeah,
yeah,
it
we'll
has to do with
know.
plants.
Good. Okay, great. Lovely.
Yeah.
What was the most difficult aspect of writing this book, as long as we're talking about the writing process?
I had an absolute blast writing it. I'm such a nerd, and I had my big stack of plant books next to me, and I just love researching. And um, I think I mentioned, sometimes it was difficult trying to figure out correspondences for some of the runes. I think the hardest part about writing and publishing a book, though, is once it's out, can't change anything. And I read my book and I need to stop reading my book because I can't tell you how many times I'm like, oh, I could have wrote this way, or I could have added this, or oh, you know what? I don't think I like that sentence at all. And it's torture. It's like, why do this to yourself? Because it's out there now.
Yes, and I feel so much that way about my forthcoming book as well, because I'm just starting the promo, so I'm doing, a lot of workshops and going to conferences with it and stuff like that. And
Healing the runes, right?
yes, queering the runes.
I'm so
So,
excited for it.
oh my god, I can't wait for other people to read it, and also I'm terrified for other people to read it. But I was like pulling my slides together for conference stuff, and I was like, wait a minute, how did I not talk about this in the book? And it's kind of like, I don't know, like my next book can't be, okay, this time we're really queering the runes. Um like the runes but more gay this time.
Yep.
So it's the kind of thing where it's like you have to stop at like you once it's in, and there's
Yeah.
nothing you can do.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, runes for the greener witch,
right.
part 2, right, right. Yeah, I
Even more runes and even more plants.
uh, it just came out in January too, and it's only the end of June, and already I think I've like rewrote the whole book 3 times in my head. So,
I know.
but
I
as long as I know it's what other people go through too, then Makes me feel a little bit better.
Yeah, I think that my next book, it's interesting because I think that as a writer, and this podcast and potential future projects and my newsletter and all of that stuff, I'm always talking about creativity all the time. So like none of this is off topic for this. But I think that, once you have like a first book out and you've made it through the publishing process once, like there's this whole realization of like, oh my God, like, you know, I need to maybe shift some ways that I work, or I know that happened for me at least. I should speak for myself. Um but yeah, it kind of really
I
shifted like
totally
how
get that.
I was like, "Oh wait. So, this is the round of edits where I can change things, and then after this it's really done." Um
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, and it's I don't know, and I'm sure that, that changes, that grows even more, like the process like grows and continues to change even more, like the longer you're writing.
right. And we often see authors, 20 years later put out the book again with stuff that they wanted to add. So I guess it happens to everyone.
Claiming it now, we're going to be able to put out both of our books like in a special edition 20 years
Yep.
from now because they've sold wildly.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so I guess I kind of like the last question that I really sent you is there anything that you weren't able to include that you wish you could have? And so barring things that are in the new book, obviously, um, at least in terms of like the runes and plants and all of those things, what do you wish you could have, maybe spent more time on or included more of?
I mean, had the publisher let me keep going, I mean, it could have been 500 pages. I would have loved for each room to have 20 plants.
Right?
Um, but other than that, I don't know. I don't know. That's a tough question. So I think if I could have changed anything, I would have just added a whole lot more plants. Other than
Yeah.
that, for the most part, I like my book sometimes.
Big mood. Yes.
Sometimes I
Um,
read it and I'm like, oh no, well, that's happened a couple times, yeah. But it just goes to show you how we grow as people and how things change and yeah. But no, if I could have made it a bigger, longer book, with 20 plants for each rune, I would have loved that. But the publisher makes you stop somewhere,
yes.
fortunately.
And there are so many too. Um, I
Yeah.
feel like I have this like database of herbal study that I do, and like I always feel like I can add to it, but then when you try to tame any of that into some sort of semblance of something, it just is really difficult. Um
Yeah.
and yeah.
Yeah, for
Um
sure. Whenever you're just so excited and you have all like literally information pouring out of you, it is really difficult to scale it down to what a publisher wants, like what between 200 and 300 pages usually. And
right. And
you
also
know,
what a reader can sit down and read.
that too. That too.
Yeah. I will say one thing that I really enjoyed about your writing style as well, and maybe this is just because a lot of the nonfiction I've been reading lately has been very academic in nature. And so, like, I needed a bit of a breath of fresh air, but it felt very conversational. And but in a way that wasn't cheesy.
Oh, that's
Like
good.
sometimes I feel like, or that might just be my taste, I don't know, but like sometimes I feel like super conversational writing styles can detract from the information being shared, but I felt like you threaded a really nice line there.
Oh, good.
Because it was, yeah, I was reading, a book from someone who um has been, I don't know, like it felt very casual and in a way of that, like I felt like I could connect.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. A lot of people have commented on the conversational style of writing, and um, it did make me kind of nervous that am I like a little too, since that seems to be like the main feedback that I'm getting. So I've been very conscious of that in my. I mean, I like casual. I like being a little bit silly. Um, but yeah, like you said, I was worried that that could get in the way of the information that I'm trying to share. Um, a couple years ago, I tried to collaborate with a friend, and we were writing a book together about shadow work and divination. And 100 pages into it, we were both like, "Yeah, we can't do this anymore," because she's very she's a teacher by by profession, and she's very scholarly in the way she writes and talks. And me, I am, like you said, very conversational, very casual, throwing jokes in. And there was such a stark difference. You could see the difference in each paragraph who wrote what. It was just like not happening. We were like, "No offense, love you, but
Yes.
we're not. We can't do this together."
Yes, I think that there's something very special about finding somebody that you can write a book with because I definitely don't take for granted that my first book was also a co-authored book.
Okay.
Um yeah, Lessons from the Empress was co-authored by a very dear friend of mine, Cassandra Snow. They had already put out two full books on their own. So it was my first published
Okay.
book.
Yeah.
Um but we ended up um we have very different writing styles. At the time that I was writing, my pieces for that book, I was definitely in what you said, the teacher mind space. But for me, that was, how can I say this in the simplest way possible in order to ensure that the most people understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And they were being a little bit more experimentational and like poetic and stuff in terms of how they were writing. And so we had to kind of like, come to grips with and even out
Mm,
our writing styles because,
yeah.
you know, um but it is a process, and then there are also just some writing styles that like absolutely don't go together.
Yeah.
Um
And that's okay.
and yeah, totally okay. I mean, like it is how people work, right? Like it's yeah. Um
Yeah.
but I feel very fortunate that it was with Cassandra that I wrote Lessons from the Empress because that was probably about as good of a working relationship like with another writer that I personally have ever had. So I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm so fortunate. I am so fortunate that this is that
Uh,
this is what this was.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. Um we have a little bit more time left. Gosh. Um I'm trying to think of how to wrap things up. We've kind of spent a lot more time talking about the creative process on this episode than I had initially intended on going in with, but I'm really glad that we have had this conversation. Yeah, like I don't want to just go through the book and be like, "All right, so what are your thoughts on Gifu, Gaybo?" Like I don't want to necessarily do that, but kind of these conversations about the meatier behind the scenes work. Um, so if you can't talk about your next writing project, what other things might people be interested in? You have a very beautiful Instagram account, Handfuls of Dust. It's also connected to your apothecary. Your photography is gorgeous.
Oh,
Like what are you excited about? How can people find you? What's coming
yeah,
next other than the book of which we cannot speak?
right. um, so there is, yeah, one thing that I'd love to talk about, that I am really excited about. Um, and it starts with something sad. Like I mentioned earlier, my dog Lunar passed away last week, and for a long time I've been trying to figure out how I can include my love for animals in with my business. Um, you can probably hear my dog barking right now. Jeez.
Of course, on cue.
Yes, I have a lot of animals. I love animals so, so much. And what happened with Lunar is, sadly, when he needed to go, I was lacking funds. And we had to wait about a week, unfortunately,
Oh,
um to let him pass because of finances. And it was very stressful. It was very heartbreaking. And I realized after Lunar passed that he was telling me that what I've been looking for to do about, with animals is I I'm gonna start donating 10% of sales, specifically to families who are unable to pay for vet bills or are unable to seek end of life services, you know, at the time when it's needed. So that's something very near and dear to my heart and something I'm very excited about. And I feel like that was a gift to me from my dog. And so, yeah, I'm super excited to be able to start giving back, not just, making money in my shop, but to, you know, help a cause that I'm really, uh, that means a lot to me. So,
yeah, that's really important work, actually. I think, speaking as somebody who also loves animals, um, and, I want to be able to provide for them in every possible way, but also sometimes finances are really tight. And I think that that's really beautiful. So, if other people who are
thank you.
listening are kind of vibing with this conversation, I will put links to both the Etsy site, the apothecary, everything in the show notes, of course, for Nicole. And know that your extra dollars are going towards something really, really important.
Yeah, and it's gonna take, a little while for that bank account or whatever to add up. But I want it to be I want to be able to have people, even reach out to me on Instagram like, "Hey, I really need help with this vet bill," or, I don't want it to just go to some uh what am I trying to say? I don't know. It's just some random charity that my immediate community will see no part of. Um, so yeah, if anyone listening ever needs help with vet bills, message me and let's see what we can do, because
Yeah.
that's what I'm trying to do here now. So yeah.
Yeah. I think that end of life care, death care stuff is something that's been really calling to me lately as well. Not as much in the animal realm for me personally. I have had a spring of many deaths. There have been a lot
Mhm.
of like deaths, just generally speaking, whether it's within my own family or other people that I know.
Yeah.
And so I definitely feel that intensely and wanting to, offer support. And I also think that, pet death is It's really challenging, and I think that we don't have, I mean, I think that we prioritize human death, of course, and like helping people grieve and move on from human death. But also, I think that, like pet death is really traumatic in a lot of cases.
Oh my God.
And, depending on your relationship with your pets, like, it's really hard, and there are not nearly as many resources available.
Right. I actually I go to a support group. I mean, it's an online support group, but yeah, this I some people don't realize how traumatic that can be. That losing a pet is you're losing a family member, and it's
Truly, truly though.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely, I agree with you. Yeah, maybe that's another thing I can do. Host a pet loss support group. See, you're giving me ideas too, or I'm giving myself ideas. I don't know, but
I'm an idea machine. I like to generate them and then give them to other people to do. Because I am known to do too many of them myself.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, so as we're wrapping up, that is a really beautiful thing. Um, is there anything else that you wanted to say to listeners? Any parting words of encouragement or wisdom?
Yeah, if you fail doing something, keep going. You know, failure is not a bad thing. Failure is a teacher.
Yes,
So yeah,
failure is a teacher, and failure also shows that you did something.
exactly. Yeah,
Like,
you're trying.
yeah.
And if you can't hear the plants talking to you, you just haven't found the right way to listen yet.
Yeah. All right. Well, I will link to, your website, your book, of course, and other stuff in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time today, Nicolette. And I
Yeah.
am so looking forward to hearing more from you in the future.
Thank you so much, Siri. It was my pleasure.
All right.